Welcome to Tao Living, the Art of Living podcast with your host, Corleto, where you will be supported to remember that you are the driver and not the vehicle, so that you can walk your life in trust. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Tao Living podcast, the Art of Living. And this has just been a special day for me because I've had a couple guests today unpacking some amazing wisdom and deep connections of soulful friendships, teachers, mentors, and this man in front of you right now is high on that list. So I am really grateful for Dr. Brian Lumb to take time out of his busy flow of fathering and practice building and mentorshipping around the world to be here to play with us, right? So as always, it's greedy because I pick people that I want to learn from on the show, and then I hold the space that all the listeners get to bathe in the wisdom that comes out as well. So brother, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. I feel like this is a full circle moment for both of us.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if there's like a statute of limitations law. So I don't know if I should say this out loud. Because literally just now I had this right? Spirit just popped this memory. So for the listening audience, when Brian and I first met, I had a practice. He was just coming out of graduating school. He shows up and I think he walked in the door and I tagged him high five and I left on a mission trip and he stayed and took care of everybody. Well,
oh, that's right.
Legally, he didn't have a license.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's what I mean by the statute of limitations.
I think we're safe. Yeah.
I don't know if I should tell this story quite yet.
Yeah.
So
that is true. My first week in practice was practicing without a license. It's like as old time chiropractic as you can get. And of course, no other than, a renegade such as yourself would even say yes to that. I don't think I was smart enough at the time to know.
Know yourself.
Yeah. I was just like, I mean, and when you just graduate, what do you have to lose? It's just like I literally I was going to say, I literally just got my license. I literally had my diploma. I probably didn't even have it at that time. It's just hot off the presses. So, I mean, I had
oh, Lordy.
5 minutes.
Yeah. So I
wasn't attached to it.
Yeah. So I didn't truly, like just now as we started going, that popped, that visual went. So I shared that with the listening audience. Yeah. I shared that with the listening audience from the place that one, I never even met Brian. Like I didn't know him. Right. But there was this deep trust. And obviously I wouldn't have somebody take care of the people that I love. All right. My baby. If I didn't, right? So the fact that I could go here, man, already said volumes about this guy. And then as we spent time together to understand his brilliance across the border, I'm like, whoa, okay. I remember what was it? You were like 6 going to Japan to learn with Suzuki, right? Cello. I'm like, I can barely play the CD player. Like, how do you play a cello at 6, right? Just unpacking this wisdom. And then we used to have these classes for the public where Brian and I would just hold court and, just share this wisdom with people. And it was just, right. Great. And then to watch this man take off from the place that I first met him, this genius out in Seattle, and then becoming the top of the food chain in NSA, right? Network Spinal Analysis, to now, full circle coming back to the East Coast from the West Coast.
Right.
And now there's his next birth of this beautiful thing called the Genius Frequency. So to watch your continued growth and evolution, my friend, has been a joy. It's been inspirational, right? So let's go there. Let's unpack. What is the Genius Frequency?
Yeah. Well, I want to take it back one step because I want to kind of highlight and accentuate something that you pointed out. And that is just at a young age, I mean, you were not that much older than me. And at the same, I knew that I knew enough to fail in practice. And in fact, that's exactly what I did at your practice. I basically failed in practice. I remember the last week that I was there, I had gone, I tell this as part of my story, that, I had built my practice up to, 25, 30 visits a week. And over the course of, a month, I dropped it down to the last week I was there. I had 1 person on the books. And I remember you coming up to me and saying dude, what is going on? And, I wanted to and did project all the reasons why at that time, it's like this perfect storm of alignment where I had to leave, and yet I wasn't courageous enough to have the conversation that said, like, I have to leave. And you were gracious enough to like watch me painfully fall the fuck apart, and also have the courage to come up to me and ask me point blank, like, what is going on with you? Like, what is happening on the inside? And you were really like, you're Lou. You've always been Lou. And you were intense then, you're intense now. And it's this beautiful, like amalgamation of like truth and love. There's always like the truth there, and there's always enough love to support the truth that's there. Of course, I wasn't necessarily whole enough to receive that. I was just like, fuck you, it's your fault. It's Tennessee, it's too many Christian churches in this area. It's like nobody knows me. Peace out, brother. I'm out of here, man. And took me a long time to realize, and of course then take on someone in my practice to realize, to be on the other side of the equation and sit across that gap. Now me playing your part and someone else playing my part, to go like, wow, Lou was right, man. I had some stuff that I just couldn't and wasn't willing to navigate. So there was like that version of life going on, which is like, that's like how we human, right? There's like, you're a man, you've got your stuff, and I'm becoming a man, you're a business. So we have stuff, like we're navigating the stuff of being human. And when we met, we like knew each other for thousands and thousands and thousands and millions of years. Like we knew each other, and we were like, okay, we might micro screw each other over, but we'll never macro. Like we're like, the bond is there from the moment we knew it and we trusted each other. And that was also my go sign with you, because like I said, I knew enough that I was going to fail. And I wanted to be with someone who I felt was clear in what they were doing and walking authentically the talk. And, still to this day, I've met very few people who, like, when they say they're going to do something, they do something. And it's just like, I mean, it's deep. Like there's no, you're immovable in your trust and in your faith too. And so for me, those first 2 years were the perfect incubation, was exactly what I needed to then be able to do all the things that you talked about afterwards. I think there's some people who come out of the womb and they're like, I can do this on my own. I was not one of those. I needed some coddling, and I got it, and it was brilliant. And then, and then I had just enough like fire inside me of the anger and disappointment of not following through with what I said I was going to follow through. But that's the other thing about agreements, is like, we think an agreement's one thing, and it is at a personal level, but we don't necessarily know the soul agreement. And the soul agreement was like, hey, I'm going to give you everything that you need to fail miserably because you need to. And then you will find within you everything that you need to go beyond that. And that's exactly what happened.
That's a beautiful description, brother. And it's just, so I appreciate all the hit Spirit's given me, is as you were talking about, like, so yeah, we didn't know each other and we met, but we knew each other soulfully. Right when you said that, I remember Brianna, I think she was 2.5, right? She walks up to you, she's now 30, dude. She's now 30. So she walks up, she's like 2.5 years old, and she walks up to you and goes, hey, Dr. Brian, do you remember when I was a little boy in China, I used to wear red pants and, or yellow pants, whatever she said. And you were my mommy and daddy was my daddy.
Right. As soon as she said that, both you and I, we knew we were screwed. We were like, she's right. I don't want to think about this. We're not going to talk about this much until maybe 30 years later when we could both handle it. But yeah, that was the kind of relationship that we knew we were entering into. It was just like, okay, this is a multi-dimensional thing.
Right.
And it's also a 3D thing.
Right.
And so for us to navigate that territory at that time period, I think was like, it was precious for me. It was really important. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Yeah, so and on that note, right, ladies and gentlemen, here's this really cool place in case you either might be experiencing that and not sure how to navigate it. Because of Brian and I's deep, deep soulful connection, we don't speak a lot in 3D. Like, matter of fact, I probably was a year and a half ago that I saw him, like literally. And before that, probably 5 years. Like, we don't, but we don't need to. Yeah. Because we're constantly connected at a deep level. Now, I choose to improve the 3D communication for sure.
Right, both of us. Yeah, both of us are working on that.
We can improve that for sure.
We could.
I can start with a postcard or something. And because there's this knowingness that it's always there, right? Versus certain people that if I don't speak to in a year and a half, 2 years, and I speak to them, they may be like, well, you're acting kind of close. Like, you haven't talked to me. You know, what is this, fake? I'm like, no, dude, I've been connected, right? Yeah. And you know, so just recognizing your essence for that. And for listening audience, if you know that's true for you, honor that, right? One, improve your ability to communicate in 3D, but also nurture that deep relationship that you have with people that you're always connected in the field. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Know that to be true. So that being said, back to the Genius Frequency, man. Unpack that. Yeah. What is it? What's going on? Why should people care? You know.
Right. Well, I don't know if they should or not, but we'll unpack it. There's this moment I think any great artist gets to, and by great I mean great in the sense of they've worked their craft, they've devoted their life to it. They've bought and sold things to keep it going. They've stretched themselves in ways that a lot of humans just kind of like, tap out at. And that is where the creation of art itself is the reason. Now, whether anyone who in receipt of said creation loves it, thinks it's great, approves, they don't really give a shit, And I feel like I'm right on the edge of that. Nice. I feel like I'm getting to the point now where I'm just like, I just love creating. I just love the act of creation itself. And if this is great for someone else, then fantastic. Now, that all being said, I gave way too many shits for a very long time, and was very driven by, a lack of feeling internally like I wasn't enough, and I always had to measure up to something that I wasn't. And, so there's this tipping point of our wound translates and transforms into the very nature, the very essence of, I think, what pure creation is. It is just this crazy, explosive, explorative, expansion, from the moment that we think are the origins, which is, as my son Maxwell asked me the other day, he's like, Dada, do you know about the Big Boom? And I was like, do you mean the Big Bang? He's like, no, the Big Boom. I'm like, well, what's the Big Boom? He's like, it's the beginning. And I was like, I do know about the Big Boom. He's 6. We have conversations that I rarely have with like grown ass adults, with the level of consciousness that he's rolling on. I digress. So that kind of creation is, I think what this whole universe is about. And, of course, now there's physicists who are like, no, it's not just one, dude. There's a bunch. So not even to speak of that. Where I'm at now and kind of what happened was a result of a falling apart of a lot of things in my life. I ended up leaving what I was doing. You mentioned I was very involved for 20 years in the network community, network spinal analysis. Now it's network spinal. And I was teaching it at a chiropractic college. I was teaching it at the highest level that was available. The next highest and final level had been offered to me. And I came to a certain point where I realized like there was a misalignment between me continuing down that path and where I was supposed to go. And the beautiful thing and terrifying thing about that moment is I didn't really know where I was supposed to go at that moment. I just knew that something didn't feel right. And it was right at the time period that my son Maxwell landed, probably just a coincidence. Not a coincidence, of course. And so next in line was then the realization that I was in a relationship that had a lot of stuff that wasn't aligned with me, and nothing against the relationship. I mean, I learned so many things. And one of the things I learned is whatever you don't clean up in one relationship is sitting there waiting for you in your next. You can't, you can walk away from people, but you can't walk away from your own shit. And that's a real
try as we may.
We try as we may. We do all the time. We like to pretend that we can walk away from things, and whatever we can't walk away, we just point.
Project it. Yeah, we just keep projecting
somewhere else. We just go, that's you, right? So that was the culmination of a falling apart that also coincided with my dad's health declining, and there was just a lot of things that felt like they were falling away. And, when I tell this story, it could sound like, I'm very Zen and I was like just allowing it. And, I will say a lot of it was just, I was gripping and holding on, white knuckles, blood running from my fingers as I was trying to still hold on to the very things that were leaving. And then there were certain points where I just had realization of like, okay, it just is time to let go. And at that same time, I also started waking up in the middle of the night with these downloads of little tweaks that I was being told to make and how I worked with people in terms of their spine, their nervous system, their energy system. And that was the beginnings of a 5-year path of starting as a practitioner of network spinal analysis and this divergence in this path to the point where now we have this, whatever you want to call it, methodology called Genius Frequency that is essentially in support of the recognition and embodiment for people that we are made of the elements, that the elements are our teachers, that the elements are our ancestors. And, this is indigenous wisdom. This is nothing that I came up with. This has been around for eons, and not just one particular region of the world. It's like you look at every indigenous population and they're all telling some story of the elements, and not 4, but 5. So, we look at, for instance, Western astrology, and we look at 4 elements, which is, in terms of like tropical Western astrology, it's earth, water, fire, and air. And one of the things that I got along the path, because I was kind of struggling, I'm like, well, the elements, like, okay, so the indigenous talk about 5, and it depends, like everyone uses a little bit different language, whether you're looking at Native American or West African or, Chinese or whatever. They all have little tweaks in their variances, but they all agree on 5. And so I was kind of pondering this whole thing, like, why are we with 4 with this thing? And I woke up in the middle of the night and said, 4 is a trap. 4 is a trap to 3D. 4 is what keeps you in 3D. But the indigenous knew that 5 opened us up. The container was big enough to support the amalgamation and lack of separation, or the unity of physical reality and non-physical reality. So we could look at 3D as, the XYZ plane, and then we add 4th in as time. And as soon as we punch above time, if we were to say like 5th dimensional awareness or intelligence, we've now shifted the angulation of reality in such a way that to us, a 5th dimensional being or experience might be invisible to our eyes because it's out of the spectrum of the reality that we live in. And yet, through all kinds of experiences, humans, whether it's, finding a mushroom growing out of a cow turd and eating it, and 10 hours later, after being having your mind bent and blown wide open and having conversations in all different, ways of people who are here and not here. And, people way back when realized that like, hey, there's a little bit more going on here. So anyways, Genius Frequency is essentially a way for us to connect with the elements in our body, to see how earth expresses, to see how water expresses, to see how fire, how mineral, how air, and nature. So I'm actually working with 6 with the same notion that I see the planet Earth right now moving into a 5th dimensional reality. And so what would support that is the capacity to be embodying 6. And when I say I see, I mean like these were one of the things that, I woke up in the middle of the night with. And I wrestled with that too, because, I am a white man, like we are a dying breed. And, there's a lot of conversation these days about people are commandeering this beautiful sacred wisdom, which has been kept separate and secret for a while for good reason, because the consciousness of the planet was not available to be with it in the way that it's meant to be. And so I had trouble going like, okay, well, all these indigenous people are saying 5, and here I am saying 6. And at the same time, there are stories on the planet, there are wisdom stories on the planet that are saying this is the point in time right now where the indigenous wisdom and the technological modern wisdom are to come together as one and create something new. And so for that, all along the way, I feel like even as a white man, doing the things that I'm doing, I have and feel the permission slips that have been handed out all along. Now, granted, I have a lot to learn along this path, and I'm the more I do it, the more humble I get. So at this point, everything that I'm sharing is like, through the lens of, a dude that grew up in, suburbia, Silicon Valley area. And at the same time, I also have deep rememberings of lifetimes beyond this one. So it's from that perspective that I can say, well, yes, I carry this suit right now. And, I also remember many lifetimes of being in realities that are quite different from this one. And it's been really through the work that has been emergent through me that I've been able to tap into that more deeply without having to utilize things like plant medicines. Nothing against it. It's just been, for me, a little bit more conscious practice since this whole thing started unfolding.
Mm-hmm. First of all, thank you for the description. And I really appreciate the fact that you wrapped it towards the end to include the truth of that, which is like, oh, who am I, this white man, to do da-da-da, right? And then the truth of going, that's just the suit that I'm wearing now, right? I've wore the indigenous suits thousands of times before. So, and like, we can go to the flip side. How many indigenous now have no idea of the truth of their own culture, right? Yes. So they're technically inhabited in an indigenous form, but have no connection to the ancient wisdom that came through their own culture, right? So
exactly.
So thanks for getting that clear. Well, for your own self to be able to walk in the truth of presenting and not letting a potential limitation of story.
Yeah, for sure. And, it is in these times where I think there's, we're at a great masquerade party. Like everyone thinks they know who they're looking at, right? But if, it's the whole, like, I mean, as simple as this is, take the mask off. Like, it's the how can you know the contents of the book by just staring at the cover? I mean, maybe it's a brilliant writer that had a shitty illustrator, and, don't blame the, I mean, they were responsible for that, right? But here's the thing. It's like, we have to actually have conversations with one another. We have to sit down and break bread and have tea. And we need to be a person can know me by being with me, right? A person can know you by being with you, but just cut out a little snippet and throw it online, and someone watches it for 10 seconds and suddenly they have the ability to know who you are and what you're saying. Sure, if they're like connected at that level and they're like, I feel your resonance, I feel your presence. But if what's coming out is this distorted criticism with a whole lot of judgment, they're just showing you the parts of themselves that they have yet to be informed by, to be included in. And there's a lot of that happening on the planet right now with, great fury. And it's the soup of the day.
Yeah. Well, and the beauty of the contrast with the work that you're now bringing forth, it's in complete polar opposite to what the paradigm is, which is to keep people numb and dumb and stupid and afraid of the remembrance of their true essence, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And thank goodness you're continually going in the opposite direction and go, no, wake up. And not only wake up, but wake up to even a higher truth of who you are, what you're capable of, and what's essential to elevate the entire spectrum.
Yes. Well, and that's a point that I think that you and I agreed on. I think that first moment we were like, okay, wait, why are you here for the thing? Are you here for the big party where we all wake up and you are? Okay, great. Let's do this thing. And none of that has changed for either you or I. We may have swayed a little bit to the right or the left, but that has been our clarity. And the beautiful thing is, our relationship is now 3 decades old, minus 2 years, I think, somewhere around there. And it's taken us, we've been at this thing pretty hardcore for 3 decades, right? You would hope someone's good at something if they're doing it for 3 decades, right?
At a high level.
Yeah, at a high level. And both of us are. And at the same time, when I talk about the soup of the day, part of what's in the soup is you can have one bowl of that and 30 years can happen in 30 months. And in a couple of weeks, 30 years can happen in 30 days. And in a couple of months, 30 years can happen in 30 minutes. People are popping at an extraordinary rate, and almost to the degree at which they're popping at an extraordinary rate is also the amplification of the polarization that has been deep in our psyche, that we have been entrapped and netted in. And I don't look at that as a dark schema, although I can go down that pathway pretty hardcore. I see that the dark is here to wake us the fuck up. I see that the dark is here in many ways to say, look how courageous we are. You could learn a thing or two about how we operate because you're pretty slow. And I see that, and they're kind of rubbing our faces. They're like, you light workers are so, you're little pedestrian children.
Grow some gonads, would you?
Grow some gonads. Yeah. Find your ovaries. And
internal, external, whatever.
In deep within them. And so I see that, as an invitation. Yeah. It's time for us to be, to have, yes, loving presence, and at the same time, know when to hold the sword of truth, and don't be afraid to swing it. And there's a difference between swinging the sword of truth and throwing out a lot of the canceling that's going on in our culture right now. And again, I don't fault any of it to anyone other than it's an amplification of this quick rising.
Nice. Beautiful. Because again, really easy to match the tone, right? Versus ascending to see the gift, right? It's healing again in a whole nother dimension. So here's this opportunity that we could look at as bad and yucky and evil, and or it's a greater gift to go, hey, we're here to ask you to step up and start accelerating the process.
Yeah, totally. And I also see it as a cry for help, because there really is, I will straight up say there is so much dark, horrific things that are happening on this planet right now, things that you and I would just go how is that even possible? Well, it's been happening for a very long time. It's just now it's coming into a point where transparency and disclosure are part of the deal. It is literally part of what has to happen right now. The dark doesn't have a choice but to be transparent and disclose. So it's happening. And part of I see where, if you consider yourself to be, I kind of laugh at this word, but if you consider yourself to be a light worker, we'll just roll with it. Nothing against it. I'm just, I have kind of a dark sense of humor. As light as I am and as loving as I am, I can make light of things that are pretty, horrific. And I will say, with all the horrible things that are happening on the planet right now, there is a cry for help that basically will translate into the people who are here in support of the wholeness of humanity are going to need to support the people who've been running dark energy on the planet, which will also come along with the transfer of a lot of wealth and power. And so, people are going to want to take this stuff out into the streets and make it ugly. But that is what dark energy wants. It wants to fight fire with fire. It wants to abuse the abusers, but we can't stop the cycle of pain unless at some point we say enough and recognize that that every perpetrator has been perpetrated, and that it is always a call for love. And it's going to be hard medicine for us to do this. This is not going to be an easy thing. And at some point, we will have to do this if we want to really rise, if we really want to, we talk a good game about light and love on the planet, but are we really willing to get our hands dirty and be with some of the atrocities that have happened and support the people who have been, the predicators in this process? Because we're going to be asked to do that at some point. And there are a lot of people who are now waking up to how much wounding they've had, and they'd be like, fuck that, like kill them in the streets. You have every right to feel that way. You have every right to feel that way at some point along your process. And in fact, you have to. In order to be whole, you have to feel the anger, the rage, all the stuff. And it's calling for a certain segment of the population to go beyond that. And so these layers and levels that will emerge will be chaos to many. But that, and I could be totally wrong.
No, 100%, right? Sixth dimension, turning the cheek.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Right. The gift of showing us the humanity's greater wound of not being in the place of the heart. Otherwise, once we are in love, we wouldn't be able to do the things to each other that we are doing as a collective. When I say we, right. It's impossible to do that to another sentient being when you're in this space. Yes. Therefore, it shows that we're not, right, and mainly as a collective. So, right, that's the gift, and I love that. It's because it's been covertly happening for eons. Yes, and now it's overtly being exposed in order to finally get enough going. Wow, really? Like, really? This is who we are? Yeah, apparently. Yes. So, great. How do we pick up our game, people? Yeah. Nice.
So, no lack of work for the next,
Yeah. There's some jobs. There is. Yeah. Don't worry about that. The unemployment line. Cool. So then circling back in, which is how does, except for sounding like some new age, yummy, fluffy bullshit, how does reconnecting with the elements from an embodiment to get me into an evolutionary state to go, I can recognize this, I can feel the anger, and then I can also transcend to have enough grounded truth, so it's not some mental story of looking at people that I want to hang in the town square and beat like a piñata. To like, okay, I've played that out, and now but all that's going to do is keep the cycle going, right? So how can I then actually go and I forgive you?
Yeah, beautiful question.
I can't forgive you outside of me, so that was a bad example, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a clear question and beautiful question. So, the short answer of that would be, so we deepen our connection to Earth, and Earth teaches us about stability. Earth teaches us that we, in our bodies, have a safe, stable home, and it's a paradox, right? So the Earth right now is spinning and spiraling at like thousands of miles an hour, through that's just the spin, let alone, the actual hurling that's going on. it is, I mean, if it were a carnival ride and we were kind of, if we were 100 times bigger than we are, maybe 1,000 times bigger, we would freak the fuck out. I mean, we would be vomiting and shitting ourselves the entire ride. But our experience, because we're so small, like think of a flea on a dog, like, the dog seems stable, even though it's running across the field because of the size and gravity. And so Earth gives us this illusion that we're stable and we're safe in home. And that's what our physical body does. So that's the teaching of Earth, and that there's abundance there, that we have everything that we need, which is what Earth shows us. It's nice. Earth is like, everything that you need is here, everything. So then water, so when we embody that, then we start to feel safe in our body, safe in ourselves, and people actually start to feel safe around us. We start to literally project that Earth energy, that you're at home, you're safe here. Water is kind of opposite in that it goes everywhere. It flows, whatever container water assumes it can. It's very malleable. And so water is that great teacher of change. It allows us to experience rapid changes and how to move with it. And so on the interior, for us humans, that translates as feelings. So we're experiencing changes on the outside, and how we experience that from like a neurological perspective is it shows up as feelings. So there's this broad spectrum of feelings. You could almost look at feelings like colors and all the different variations. There's some primary ones we could look at, but then there's all the variations. Are we talking canary yellow or banana yellow? And so those would be all the different flavors of feelings that we have. And at its finest, Earth at its highest teaching is essentially teaching us about peace. So it's like still water. And so along the way to peace is a whole lot of tumultuous feeling. And so it's also something that I think is lacking in our culture. And when I say our culture, I mean modern culture, is the recognition that emotions are not a spectrum, they're a wheel. And there are these harmonic resonances with both ends of, if we're going to look at it as spectral kind of thing, but connected, a spectrum holding hands. So like, for instance, grief, a lot of people don't do well with, and they don't like to experience. Same thing with like anger, or frustration. And yet people who don't feel grief also don't feel profound levels of joy because they're lovers. Those two have been at it forever. Same thing with anger and courage. And even another harmonic is passion. And so it's like, if you can't express anger, and I never mean at someone else. That's the other thing, is we always interpret like, oh, well, anger, it's like, well, go to your room, like, fucking punch a pillow, yell and scream at a pillow. You don't need another human being. It helps to have someone piss you off to help you find your anger, but that's all they're doing, right? It's in you. It's not out there somewhere. So without anger, we don't have courage. Without frustration, we don't have peace, and so on and so forth. So water teaches us that. Fire connects us to our lineage, our ancestors, and it also connects us to spirit. And so through fire, we forge our identity based upon the gifts and the foibles of our ancestors, the fuck ups of our ancestors. And we learn from that. And at the same time, it also aligns us with spirit. So then our identity, instead of being modulated and amalgamated, through what the culture tells us to be, fire helps burn through all that stuff so that we know who we are as a connection of spirit and our lineage. And then mineral supports a deep remembering. So like our bones are mineral base. And so it's deep within our bones. So when we went through the canal, we had the bones that they get squished together. And that moment of intensity of our mother, that moment, those bones set into motion, the soul coming into form for many. For some, it takes a couple days earlier. If it's really stressful, sometimes the soul come in early. And so that deep in our bones remembrance of who we are, and embedded within our bones and who we are, is why we're here. So our mission on this planet is at that level of death. And then we have air, which teaches us about vision. It teaches us about spaciousness. It teaches us about the breath of life as our tether, as our connection to soul, to that part of us that's lived many lives, that's here to have the vision of lifetimes, to live a life of legacy that impacts the souls of many generations to come. And then finally, nature is the energy of which all of creation is made. And so nature's kind of like put all the elements in a blender, turn it on high, and you've got nature. It's like everything all at once. Right now is a perfect moment of nature. I look out the window and there are trees that are not deciduous, the firs that are green, evergreens, we call them because they're evergreen. I had that conversation with Maxwell. He's like, so they're called evergreen because they're evergreen? And I was like, Maxwell, I never even knew that. And he's like, really? You didn't know that? And I'm like, no, I always called them evergreens. He was like, Dada, it means they're for always green. And I'm like, who are you? I know who you are, never mind. So, and then there's the trees that have been barren for months now. And it's like nothing, 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 nothing. And all of a sudden, one weekend you wake up and it's just an explosion of life. And that is nature. And nature teaches us about responding to the moment that it seems chaotic, that we can't control because we can't. And how can we be so in our nature that we become nature and we are that explosive energy that organizes instantaneously? So nature element is perfect. And by the way, according to the beautiful community of human beings who are just, they're exquisite earthers. Like, all indigenous are exquisite earthers. This particular group to me have been kind of my satellite teachers through a man named Malidoma Patrice Somé. He recently passed. He is now one of our ancestors and a teacher and guide to many. His community, he came from West Africa, Burkina Faso, and they're called the Dagara. And they have this cosmology where every year it's a different element. So as that year holds the frequency of an element. So this year is a 3-year, which essentially is a nature year. So this is a year about transformation. This is a year about chaos becoming something new. This is a year about magic. And so if there was ever a year for you to become something new, to reinvent yourself, which really means just let the shit that's not you fall away so the real you can show up. This is the year to do that. So that's a long answer to a beautiful question. And as we have access to these teachers, which then speak to us and through us, because they've been around for fucking ever. Like these, earth, water, fire, mineral, air, and nature, they're OG. Like we came after all of those. And we are formed and informed by them. So when we start to be able to listen to the teachings of the very things that we're made of, then we have access to anything. We can be that in any given moment, which I think is really something special to behold in this time.
Wow. So ladies and gentlemen, go back and, rewind the last 10 minutes and listen to that just download of brilliance, quickly scanning through the elements as Brian just described that, because it's packed full of wisdom in there. And the thing for me is the polar dance. Now, as you talked about the elements, is when I look just even practically, right? So the last couple of years, be afraid of breath, right? So right?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
People be afraid of fire because fire burns, right? And something that's been in me, because it's not only soulful to be as a human, which is the earth is 3/4 water, right? Like I love the ocean, and people don't go in it, right? It's like they're afraid of the ocean because something's going to eat them, right? So it's all this to disconnect from the elements, right? So how can we embody the teaching if we won't even engage in the elements, right? So there's that.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes. Yes. And I mean, this is the thing that I love, something that's like has always been authentic with you. As I see you as a early earther. I just see you as always having had this connection to this wisdom without having to read the books to do it. And something that we started out the show, our viewers weren't privy to the conversation that we had before the show, but you know, I am not in this way. Like, I love going in nature. I love being in nature. That's the year I was born. You know, that's the frequency that brings me, you know, connection, safety, peace, all that stuff. And I just feel like you're constantly, you know, when you're not serving people, you're serving your immersion in the elements themselves at an edge that I think very few people on this planet do. And I think that is one of your brilliant means of accessing, you know, your shamanism and your divinity, essentially, is because you've never been one that's afraid. I mean, I know you've been terrified in your life, but you've never been afraid to be afraid. And I think that is something that human beings, so much now on the planet, as you mentioned, you know, we could peel back every year, and there's been two things happening simultaneously. One is the elemental frequency to inform us. That's ours to connect with. It's not being advertised, and yet the hum and the frequency is there. And then there's what is promoted to us and advertised to us on the waves, of the very thing to fear. And every year there's a new fear. This year it's you know, finances. You know, the year before that, like you said, there's breath. There's like, be afraid of community. Like, be afraid to be, you know, keep your distance. Yeah, connected to anyone, because it'll kill you. It's like, that's interesting, because I feel like we have almost 8 billion people on the planet because we connected, not because we disconnected. You know, so it is such a choice point right now to who do you listen to? And the ultimate answer is there's only two, which is only one. And the only answer that we have that's proper in this moment is your connection to whatever you want to call it, spirit, God, universe, like whatever your name for that is, like that's the one answer. However, the way to get there is you get connected in your body. You deepen your connection to yourself. And, you know, one precedes the other in essence. And why I see, you know, again, our early meeting was just like, hey, you're here to support humanity and the rise of it through this sacred time period, as am I. And we have both chosen the OG vessel, which is like, hey, look, and, you know, I say this lightly to the spiritual community, is like, you know, pray and meditate all you want. That's great. I think those are wonderful practices. However, those are the outer spokes to, are you connected to your body? And if you're not, then it's potentially a disconnection and just another means to try and navigate the pain of the reality that while, yes, you're a spiritual being, you happen to land on a planet whose curriculum is all about form. So if we don't get into form, like, you know, that's why a lot of spiritual people check out in all these weird ways. It's because, you know, I mean, great that they devoted their life to spirit, but they didn't do it in the way that the curriculum asked. And so it's like, you know, you go to get a Harvard MBA and, you know, all you do is play racquetball. Well, it's like, well, you should have got it in PE, you know, a PE degree then. You know, you showed up to the wrong school with the wrong activities.
Brilliant. There was, so that the place, so two things that popped. One was just, what was it, 2 days ago? Speaking of imbued in nature, right? So we walk out in the property, right? So it's 92 acres of just pure earth, land, animals, right? Just, and so I'm walking the property and I sit, and we had, you know, Liddy put a beautiful statue of Yoda there. And there's this redheaded woodpecker. So I've got a picture of it, who literally lands right next to Yoda. And there's this like look of the, you know, like they're engaged in communication, right? And it was just beautiful for me. Anyway, so I had this thing, and I watching, like, it clicked the old classic, oh God, it was in the 70s, right? So that moment where Luke and Yoda have this interaction. And for me, you know, Lucas, right, his brilliance of consciousness articulates in that moment about life force through nature, right, was just so profound, right? right? My ally is the force because it's energy and it binds us and connects us and it feeds us, right? Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter, blah, 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 right? It just goes in all these articulations, right? And anyway, and so while I was sitting on the earth, because I remember years ago where I've been told, as it's still today in science, which I get the logic of that the earth is, the moon is what creates the tides. And I'm like, okay, for years ago I bought it. And then as I deep into my own connection and to the earth, I don't believe that anymore. I haven't for years. She's breathing. Yeah. It's breath.
Yes.
Right. And so she breathes twice. I love that. She breathes twice a day.
I love that.
When she breathes in, tides go out. When she exhales, tides come in, right? And then a couple of years ago, I heard this recording of some guys who climbed under the Dolomites and put up some audio equipment. And they're listening to the movements of the entire Dolomites move, right? And again, and so I'm bringing it up to listening audiences. Most of us grew up is that we're living on a rock, right? No.
Right.
She's a living entity who's and until we improve the awareness of that, and then the relation to that, right? We're missing and devoid of a lot.
Yes.
So I love that beautiful piece, Brian, of reconnecting to her, right? And then nature is the gift of all the elements there in context, right? So and how much we've also removed from nature.
Yes.
How many people don't aren't near trees anymore? Trees, right?
Right. Yes. And not only devoid, but every day stripping large swaths of nature away from the surface of the earth. I mean, there's we only do, and again, I say this word loosely, it's obviously, it's not you and I, and yet it is you and I. And so I'm going to put those two together really quickly. And that is simply that, we only do to the earth that which we have not connected in with ourselves. And so part of this great awakening and part of the pain and the joy simultaneously, and this is, again, the gift of waters, we're going to need a very wide range of emotion as we start to awaken to what has been and have the precision of emotion necessary to not project, but to act together as one. This is also the time period where it's no longer about the individual on the planet. And it's not just about the individuals coming together as a collective. It's about the individuals becoming sovereign and whole, complete, in total as one, consciously choosing to come together, not losing themselves, but growing themselves en masse with other souls, other beings. And as we awaken to the atrocities that we've done to ourselves, the poisons that we've let into our body, the ways in which we've mistreated our bodies, the ways in which we haven't loved ourselves, we will also then awaken to the same projection that we've done upon our earth, upon our waters, upon fire, which is now electricity or technology that's rampant, not only on the earth, but circling the planet, creating a net of energy, which is not conducive to not only what we're doing to the earth, but what we're also projecting out into the solar system and therefore the universe. We can only get away with this for so long because we are impacting other communities above and beyond ourselves. And they're keeping a very close, watchful eye on us right now. And there is a point where we rise in consciousness enough to where our star brothers and sisters will be, and they already have been for many people on the planet, but they will come essentially to support this next thing. But right now they're not, because it's kind of like watching, a bunch of kids throw cat shit at each other in the playground. It's kind of like, well, let's just let them wear themselves out before, we walk in, or at least realize oh my God, I'm covered in cat shit and this is horrible. Like, why did I do that? And then they'll come in with, the tissues and be like, okay, here you go. But no sane adult is going to walk in the middle of that and get hit with a cat turd. Like we're smarter than that. Right. And so are they. So, this moment that we're in is precious. And we have a lot of work to do, and the capacity and speed at which we can do this whole as individuals and then together as one is unprecedented. We don't know what we don't know, and what we don't know is how powerful we actually are, but we're about to see it.
Love that. Yeah. So, like one of the first times in my experience, just in a micro healing environment, this was decades ago on early missions, right? Humanitarian missions,
Yes.
serving people, was watching people transform in ways that I'd seen, but it took months.
Yes.
And they're doing it in days, right? I'm like,
yes.
what? But consistently. I'm like, so I had to sit back with it and going, okay, what's happening here? That they're the same people, like they're people, right?
Right.
Why is it happening here, but it doesn't happen there? And for me at that time, it was unprocessing, like basically it was just, it's the stuckness of consciousness. They don't know they're not supposed to heal because they weren't exposed to that's all you can do, or that's how long it takes, right? So that concept that you were sharing, articulating, which is, we do have our hand on the knob. We just had it dialed down, right? We had it throttled down.
Yes.
We can throttle it up and expedite
absolutely
at rapidness, right?
Yes.
And through the spectrums, right? So
absolutely. It's a collective unconscious agreement, and so as soon as we decide individually, I don't agree with that anymore, here's what I do agree to, then suddenly all these popping agreements are literally shattering the system. And that's happening daily as we speak.
Whew. So, one, taking that breath right there brought me back into somewhat a 3D time, because I know you've got stuff on the docket, as do I, and the listeners at this moment are going, I need a little time to integrate. What was you saying?
Make them stop.
Yeah, please shut up. Boom. Right. I'm gonna have to wipe my screen off because my neurons just exploded out there. So in closing, how do people get a hold of your wisdom? How can they access the Genius frequency to get through the learning curves of like, okay, what are the elements? How do I access them? How do I incorporate them? How do I embody them?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we're a little new on the block, so we're still kind of in our coming out party. For right now, find us on Instagram at geniusfrequency.com, or excuse me, Genius Frequency, that's our handle. You can also find us at geniusfrequency.com. You will find on that right now an offering, which is Genius Embodied, and it's a 7-week course designed to support you to connect with the elements, everything that I spoke of: earth, water, fire, mineral, air, nature. And they're really simple, easy practices using your own hands, your own body. And something that I love about it, which is very different than energy techniques or breath techniques, breath work or whatever, is it's very organic. So we allow your body to show you where the breath is. We allow your body to show you how to move the energy. We never even say once, like, here, take a breath here. It's always like, put your hands here and see what happens. And what happens is really magical. Your body has within it everything that it needs to do to unfold and unwind. And so that process, Genius Embodied, will allow people to really unpackage a lot of deep, old wounding that's happened, so that what's really true can start to rise to the surface. And essentially, everyone has what we call an elemental code. And so there's actually 2 codes. One unites humanity, and it's very simply, the code is this, I'll tell you. It's earth, water, fire, mineral, air, nature. It's the same for everyone. And that's what unites us. And so this class helps you connect to that order of operations that allows you to be connected to the rest of humanity. We're going to be doing a follow-up to that class, which is your elemental code. And your elemental code was divinated. It's your destiny. And all we need is your birth date to know what your order of 6 elements is. And each element represents a different way that you engage with reality. And so that course we're going to be teaching in the fall of 2023. And we're super excited about it. So those are right now the 2 paths to find us. If you're in Asheville, you can come receive a Genius Frequency session at the sanctuary, and I'll give Lou the information that will be in the show notes, I imagine.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. Thank you for that. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, this, right, that was the articulation of that. If you're quick enough to grab that, awesome. But they will be hyperlinked in the show notes, so you won't have to go think. Just click, and then you'll be able to, be exposed to clearly what's there and how to access the course, the upcoming course, and then how to continue connecting into Brian and Chelsea Ray's world, right? Which I highly recommend. And I'm going to add on top of that, just because it's here in this space and field, is everything we just talked about, quite frankly, right? So May 18 to 21, my partner Lydia and I are holding a quote unquote healing transformational retreat. That's completely context is in nature, right? So it's help you to remember who you be, right? The art of living. Because when you remember that you're the driver, not just the vehicle, then you can walk your life in trust, right? So that context is there. So if any of that resonates, come play with us, right?
Lou, if I may, like, if you haven't worked with Lou and Lydia, like, please, you have to. Like, he is a living shaman. His work is beyond words to describe. And so just know that, your personal transformation is really just kind of a click away. So I highly encourage it.
Thank you, brother. Man, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, truly, the wisdom that just, Brian laid out here, of the context and construct of what's up for all the spheres, the galaxy, the planet, the universe, right down into the micro of you and I, down into the elements. Because all of that's connected until we separate it mentally. And the invitation is to let's up level, right? Let's ascend into the truth of who we are and what the system here is to offer. And his work is on the cutting edge of delivering that, right? So click those links, engage with the Genius Frequency. And thank you for tuning in. So Brian, thank you for your time. Thank you for always, right, for continually up leveling the next expression of truth, right, that we need in this moment, we collectively. And thank you for being on the show, on the podcast. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the Tao Living. And please share this far and wide, right? Because the more we can get this into the souls and the hearts of others, the better we get this gig happening. Yeah.
So thank you, Lou. It's such a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you, brother. So, so ladies and gentlemen, until next time, abundant blessings. Ciao. Thank you for tuning in to the Tao Living Podcast, The Art of Living. Click the link in the show notes for the complete details for the May 18 to May 21 Art of Living Retreat, or go to my website, loucorleto.com. Under Programs, scroll down to Live Events and choose the Art of Living, Tao Living 4-Day Retreat. Until next time, abundant blessings. Ciao.